Welcome back to the Empowa podcast. My name is Blane, and today we're joined by Bossy, co-founder of Afrimat Hemp. Cheers, Bossy, for coming on the show.
No worries. Thanks, Blane. Thanks for having me here.
No worries. So today we're going to be talking about Hempcrete and the things relating to that, which obviously links to what we're trying to do here at Empowa with climate smart sort of practices and solutions that we try to integrate into what we do. So if you're listening to this and you're into green building or innovations relating to hemp and things like that, then feel free to stick around. But to start us off, we'll begin with an introduction. So Bossy, can you please tell the podcast a bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure, Blane. So as Blane said, my name is Boshoff Muller, and I head up a company called Afrimat Hemp. Afrimat Hemp is a startup company. We founded last year, July, and it was an R&D project that started off 2018 in our group Afrimat. So Afrimat is a listed mid-tier mining company, and we've done some R&D work with one of our lime businesses, Cab Lime, on basically uses and alternative uses to lime, but specifically focusing on the sort of climate challenges and part of our carbon strategy. And we basically did some R&D work on a project in Cape Town, which is a big hemp hotel that's also been recently in the media. And yeah, we've been busy now for basically a year and a little bit with Afrimat Hemp, and we focus on green construction materials, bio-based construction materials, specifically hemp, and also focusing on the processing of hemp from raw material into usable industrial products, specifically in the hemp sector.
Interesting. The hemp hotel kind of rolls off the tongue. It's kind of a hemp hotel. So that's in
Yes.
Cape Town.
Mm-hmm.
And so
it's been dubbed the tallest building in the world where Hempcrete was used. So it's a 12-story building. And just to be clear, there was a bit of confusion after the press release. The building does consist out of a structural element, which is concrete. So it's a concrete shell. And then the infill walls all been done with Hempcrete blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So Hempcrete is a non-structural infill product and not a structural construction material.
It's still the highest hemp building in the world.
Yes.
12 stories. Interesting.
12 stories, yeah.
12 stories. So for those that don't know what Hempcrete is, what is Hempcrete? And if you have a presentation or slideshow, we can maybe share that if you want. Yeah, there we go. We can see it.
All right. So yeah, I think to start off by, what is Hempcrete? I think we, with this building and with what we're doing currently, if I get a 1 rand coin for every joke that I've heard about, what happens if the hemp hotel or hemp house burns down, everybody will be happy or high. Then I would have probably been a millionaire by now.
You'll be a billionaire, yeah.
And that's normally always my kind of intro joke to any presentation. But yeah, I think the interesting thing about Hempcrete is that there's a real science behind Hempcrete. It's not just another hippie construction material. And basically, as I mentioned, it is sorry, I just want to get there we go.
Yeah.
It is a non-structural infill construction material. So lightweight, much lighter than your kind of normal masonry products. So it's something that we see, especially post-COVID in Cape Town, that's quite in demand, is lightweight construction materials. So after COVID, a lot of the commercial buildings, people start realizing that they can work remotely, and businesses realize that it actually works quite well, and they can they can reduce costs that way. So a lot of these commercial buildings are being converted into residential buildings. And one of the advantages of using a lightweight building material, infill building material like hemp, for instance, is that you don't have to alter your substructure. So there's some cost reduction in your concrete and your steel in your substructure. You basically just alter your internal walls. So that's a trend that we're seeing in Cape Town. That's all, post-COVID happening. But yeah, as I said, it's a lightweight, non-structural infill material. There's sometimes confusion amongst the public, that you can replace concrete directly with Hempcrete, and I presume I think it's the whole crete word that sometimes get people confused. But you still need a substructural element like concrete, steel, timber, or even sort of masonry, bricks, and so on to keep your roof structure. And then your I think one thing that hemp is very good at is its ability to insulate. So that's thermal insulation and also acoustic sound insulation. And then the other advantage is humidity regulation. So with Hempcrete, the whole methodology around Hempcrete is it's a vapor permeable, it's a breathable building system. So the mortar and the plasters and also the paints that we use, it's all vapor permeable. So it's all cement-free construction. It's lime-based plasters that we're using. So it does allow sort of element of waterproofing. So there's no water ingress. But if you have any moisture in your wall, it escapes through evaporation. And that's what makes this building system so interesting around humidity regulation. We're currently busy with a project in Mozambique. We're with you guys, and it will be interesting. We're busy probing up that project in terms of temperature sensors and so forth. And we are looking forward to actually seeing the results on the humidity regulation, like a place like Mozambique, which is well known for humidity regulation. But yeah, the Hempcrete is basically consists of hemp. So I don't even want to use the word cannabis because that instantly bring a sort of a stigma that we're trying to get away from. But it's part of the cannabis family. So hemp is where your cannabis plant is the THC component is less than 0.2% in South Africa. In some countries, the THC limitations are different, but in South Africa, it's 0.2%. And we use the stalk of the plant with a lime formulation to give to make up the product Hempcrete. So Hempcrete is basically hemp and lime mixed together. And the interesting part, if I sort of get to the science of it, is the fire resistance. So just you see on the next slide, just the range of products that we do. We've done some fire ratings earlier in the year, and again, if you look at, let's say, straw and clay or wood chips and cement, because we get this question quite often, why specifically Hempcrete? Why not any other kind of material? I think the interesting thing about Hempcrete is that it's got a great fire resistance, and the reason for this is that the lime actually impregnate the hemp. The hemp is porous, and the lime actually fuses chemically with the hemp to give you that fire resistant properties. We've got some universities, local universities here in the Western Cape, doing some research on the product. And one of the professors phoned me recently and said, yes, we've tried to ignite this product, but we just can't get it. What is in this? And I think, again, it's just the basic science of Hempcrete. So yeah, it makes it very interesting.
Okay.
So yeah, I think then just in terms of Hempcrete as a bio-based building material, if you look at, you were using the word climate smart. I think this, Hempcrete is one of the most probably climate smart construction materials out there at the moment. Hemp is known as one of the fastest CO2 to biomass tools available. If we look at our current global warming situation, climate situation, the construction sector, building construction sector, contributes to about 40% of total global emissions. And of that 40%, 10% is embodied carbon footprint and 30% is operational carbon footprint. So that's typically your energy use, heating and cooling. And global targets are set for 2030 to have buildings with 40% less embodied carbon emissions. And then by 2050, 100% net zero emission buildings. And the big question at the moment, specifically, we're working with some big contractors in Cape Town who's also tendering on some carbon neutral projects coming out in the next year or two. They not really know yet how to achieve these type of targets. And I think a answer, it's not the only answer, but a answer is a bio-based material like Hempcrete. So just a bit of explanation. Hemp it's got a very short growth cycle, about 4 months, and it can absorb up to 15 tons of CO2 per hectare. When you process this hemp material, you take the material and you put it into a block, like a Hempcrete block or Hempcrete in situ casting, you effectively trap or store this carbon. And that's why it's the embodied carbon footprint is such a no-brainer from a green building material point of view. I think the other component, the lime, yes, lime is made similarly to cement. The only difference is that your lime is also burnt in a kiln like cement, but it burns at a lower temperature. Lime is burnt at 950 degrees, where cement is burned at around 1,400 degrees. So there's less energy use. And then the second thing is your lime reabsorb carbon to set. And that's the setting mechanism that you rely on when you use lime. So the net effect is that you sit with a green balance sheet if you look at a product like Hempcrete. And then to top it all, it's 100% recyclable. So your Hempcrete product, our Hempcrete product, use no cement or any weird chemicals. So you can actually use this as a fertilizer into your soil. It's very similar to your agricultural lime makeup. So yeah, in terms of the two carbon challenges, embodied carbon, but also operational carbon, Hempcrete does sort of tick both those boxes in terms of the embodied carbon footprint, as I explained, and then because of its great thermal properties, it's much more efficient on temperature regulation, so you need less heating and cooling in winter and summer. Just to give an idea, this building that we've done in Cape Town doesn't contain any aircon. So yeah, when you use Hempcrete, your building is so much more energy efficient. So yeah, that's basically, it's a mouthful, but that's it on Hempcrete.
Yeah. Quick question on so we're talking about Hempcrete as being something that has positive impact in terms of the embodied carbon emissions. When you kind of factor in that process, potentially it's a zero carbon building material because it's kind of locking up carbon yes. When you compare that to maybe a concrete block. And then also there's benefits in terms of the operational costs because it has these good thermal properties, helps regulate the temperature better, and then you have less need for heating and cooling appliances. But on the so considering that Hempcrete is beneficial from both of those sides, are there any other materials at the moment that are positive in both of those areas? Because like any comparisons out there that match both positively in the embodied energy and also the operational side, like it, or is hemp kind of fairly unique in that aspect?
I think there's a few products out there, but it either addresses the one or the other, and not both.
Yeah.
So for instance, there's some great initiatives around recycling plastic, building materials, for instance, which is also lightweight and got great thermal properties. But I think it all comes down to the raw materials. I mean, if you look at recycled plastic material, that's great. But then if you look at the binders that's used, I think some of the big questions around some of those materials are that if that catch fire or if it burns, or if, in the case of a fire, if those gases evaporate, it's quite toxic. But yeah, there's good sort of alternatives out there. That's why I'm saying I don't think Hempcrete is the only the only building material to address this type of challenge. But I think Hempcrete is quite a good all-rounder in terms of both the embodied and operational carbon footprint. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think on the operational cost side as well, like we talk about the fact there's maybe less need for cooling appliances, heating appliances, and that would lead to less carbon emissions. But from the perspective of the user or the homeowner, that also would potentially translate to cheaper, less cost associated with their energy bills as well. So it's seems like it can be a win-win scenario where it's good for the planet, but also there's benefits for the user in terms of their costs, but also in terms of the experience within the home as well. Like if the temperature is regulated correctly, then it's just a more pleasant experience inside.
And also the humidity regulation aspect of it, the living comfort of a Hempcrete house, and I think that's one of the sort of driving factors behind the Hemp Hotel as well, and developers there, was to give people the experience to come and stay in a hemp-based living environment, to experience that living comfort, because it's very difficult to explain to a potential client what it's like. I can't explain living comfort. I can tell you what it feels like, but you must experience it yourself. It actually feels what it feels like. But yeah, there's definitely the condensation and simple things like your sort of mist from a shower. Those type of things get regulated by your whole kind of hemp system, which is very interesting. You don't have these condensation challenges. Or when we breathe at night, when it's a cold night outside and we see this kind of moisture on the window type of thing. There's a lot of moisture that comes from our breath, in our household. So those type of things get regulated. It's almost like when modern construction materials or the status quo, the construction materials that we use these days are all promoted as waterproof construction materials, and we try and waterproof as far as we can. And it's almost when we sometimes use the analogy, it's almost like of wrapping yourself in cling wrap in a way. It's so Hempcrete gives you a natural but also a very healthy living environment.
Interesting. One thing I like to talk about with these sorts of things is how it can scale. So obviously, as you know, and we kind of talk about this fact at Empowa as well, there's a backlog of 50 million or so homes in Africa. And so when we're talking about trying to scale solutions in this space, especially in the environmental kind of side, you can find environmental, like you see it on Google quite a lot. You have examples of like sustainable homes that are good as one-off sorts of things. But in terms of that being a scalable solution, it's not always realistic. So in terms of Hempcrete, what are maybe some challenges or opportunities with Hempcrete in terms of scaling it as a building material? Is it something that is kind of realistic when we look at trying to address some of this housing backlog in Africa?
Yeah, so I think there's I think, like with anything, there's a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of opportunities. I think if we look at the challenges, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the policy and regulation around hemp farming. So I mean, if you look at the whole value chain of hemp, let's say Hempcrete, for instance, and just hemp production, it all starts with firstly the genetics, and then the farming aspect of it. So the first thing, I mean, just from personal experience in South Africa at the moment, from a government level, there's a lot of drive and assistance to try and assist the industrial hemp industry to come online and to start creating jobs. But the challenge is that our policy for hemp, we've basically high level just taken the medicinal cannabis policy and rules and regulations and copied and pasted into industrial hemp farming. So to give a simple example, your medicinal cannabis framework, I mean, it's an intensive crop, so it's small scale, so you don't need a lot of space. We're talking about you farm in square meters, so it's an intensive crop, and it's a high value crop. So you need few square meters, and you can create quite a lot of revenue on that small scale. But with hemp, and there's a lot of security, rules and regulations, which is for obvious reasons. But then if you look at hemp, hemp is a high volume, low value crop. So a simple example is that the current framework, you have to have a fence around your industrial hemp farm. Now, if you take this, this in practice, the typical farmer that would grow hemp would be a farmer that, for instance, is into sowing. So in other words, maize or grain or so. So you need a lot of volume. So you need 100+ hectares per farmer, and the margins are quite thin. So you're competing effectively against other kind of sowing crops. Not necessarily competing, but in terms of, if you look at, for instance, a maize farmer, hemp is a very good alternate crop to put nutrients back in your soil. But as soon as you have to go and fence your, let's say, 100 hectares of hemp farm, that cost, in terms of the modeling, it's a non-starter. And that's only one example of the policies. So from a policy point of view, I think there's still a lot of things that needs to change to assist farmers to actually look at this seriously. We at the moment, it's a big challenge to actually convince farmers to get going with hemp farming. So from a policy point of view, there's some challenges, but then also from a genetics point of view, again, currently in South Africa, we're now in a position where we're importing all our seed from America, Europe, even China, and it's very costly. So again, it's very costly for a farmer to start. So a farmer would rather just stick to what he knows and to what he's comfortable with, rather than going into something like hemp. And the other thing is obviously offtake. So because it's such infant stages, there's the offtake are still coming online quite slowly. So I think it's going to be a process it's going to be a few years still until we're farming hemp at scale, specifically in South Africa. But if I look at countries like Mozambique, Zimbabwe is probably a bit further ahead than South Africa in terms of legislation around hemp. And then, again, Mozambique, I'm aware of only one research permit that's coming online. So again, you can see that the rollout and the specifically policy is a big obstacle. Mm-hmm. And then, I think scaling, it's educating the downstream. We need more entrepreneurs and downstream businesses to pull that demand, to enable farmers to feasibly farm hemp. Mm-hmm. And then on the manufacturing side, again, there's capital needed to scale up manufacturing. So there's a few areas in the value chain that needs some work on to actually scale this up properly. But I think on the positive side, again, to grow hemp, anybody can grow hemp. It grows like a weed. Yes, a week.
Yeah.
So it grows quite easily. And I think, in Africa, it needs a lot of sunshine, needs water. And also that doesn't need that much water. So in countries, in certain areas of the country, specifically in South Africa now, where we have summer rainfall, it grows automatically. If you look at our East Coast, the Eastern Cape, KZN, it's areas where the plant traditionally grows quite well. So automatically you have, if you look at the farming, you look at the processing, you look at downstream manufacturing, there's so much job creation opportunities. And also the last point, the whole plant can be utilized from stem to the seed, the flower, and not necessarily in the cannabis space. If you talk about THC, but your minor cannabinoids. And then, if you look in the food, hemp is a superfood. There's so much interesting data that's becoming available, from America, from Europe, and I think even from Australia on, the hemp foods nutritional values for human and animal consumption.
Quick question on when you consider the cannabis plant, and you said that pretty much every part of that plant can be converted into some sort of a product potentially. The part that is used for hempcrete, would that usually be something that was considered like less valuable, like the part that is used for the hemp? Could that be used for some other product, or is that usually something that gets kind of discarded?
So it's a very good question. And I think, unfortunately for us, our business is built around the lowest value component of the plant. But yes, to answer your question, the hemp herd, so the part that we use for hempcrete, is probably the lowest value component of the whole plant. And again, we've had some interesting conversations over the last few weeks here in South Africa around the misperception. People think, they see dollar signs when they think of hemp and cannabis. But again, industrial hemp, again, if you grow for specifically something like hempcrete, it's a low value volumes exercise. But that said, you can utilize some of the other components. But yeah, the shiv or the herd, the core part of the plant that we then kind of chop up into, or crush and screen into the aggregate that we use in hempcrete, is the lowest value component. It does, however, make good animal bedding. So for your animal bedding market, that's a good product as well. So that's probably your competing market when you look at the construction, to choose if it's construction or animal bedding. That's most probably the two main markets that your herd or your shiv then gets used for.
Okay. We're nearing the end of the podcast. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to touch on?
No, look, I think the sort of the main thing is that we are in a interesting phase, globally in terms of the climate situation, and it's we all have a choice. So it's if we carry on with business as usual, we can't expect things to change. So we know we need to take some different steps and different action to the business as usual if we really want to make a change to our climate situation. I think the exciting thing for us is that hempcrete and hemp is a option to a change in the global carbon situation, but also in the housing challenge that we find in Africa. And we're proud to be a pioneer in Africa when it comes to hempcrete development and construction.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that the building industry attributes to 40% roughly of the carbon emissions globally. Did you say something along those lines?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. And then of that 40%, a percentage of that is embodied.
So 10% is embodied, and then 30% is operational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you can innovate in the space and, let's say have materials like Hempcrete that have a positive impact on both of those sorts of things, then that can have a pretty drastic effect, considering that 40% globally of the carbon emissions come from this sort of industry. So it's pretty exciting hearing these sorts of innovations. And you mentioned challenges around the value chain in terms of regulation, the farmers, and also the manufacturing, but it seems like we are incrementally moving in the right direction. It seems. Is that your sense?
No, definitely. I think it's sometimes and this is the startups, probably a startup's curse, but with any startup business, there's that first stage is always challenging, and I think it's even amplified when it's something in a new sector, like the hemp space in South Africa specifically. But sometimes one just need to pause and look back and see where we've been and where we are now to realize that there's actually progress in the right direction. So no, definitely, I think we're very upbeat about the progress this far, and I think we're going to see some exponential growth in this sector within the next 2 years. So we're very excited to take it to the next level.
I like it. I see you've got on the screen here some contact details, but for those that are just listening, how can people reach out to you guys at Afrimat Hemp?
Yeah, so we're quite active on our Instagram account. We normally post some projects, always some visual updates on our projects. We also have a LinkedIn page, and then all our other information is on our website, Afrimat Hemp. So that's www.afrimathemp.co.za, and Afrimat stands for short for African Materials. So all our details normally have. We'll be starting to put some project updates on our website soon as well. So cool. There's a lot of information on there.
Yeah, and we'll add all these links obviously below. And for the final question, what excites you the most about the future of Hempcrete?
I think for me personally, the vision, I think for all us, our founders at Afrimat Hemp, was to make a real difference. And for me personally, I have 2 young kids, and I would love to leave the planet in a better place, or at least not a worse off place, when I leave this planet one day. And I think that's something that's quite personal, quite that's feeling my passion. So yeah, hopefully leave a legacy, leave a better planet for my kids for one day.